Hi, students. This is Unit 3, Civil War and Reconstruction, and we are in Notes 1 for Sectionalism. This can be found on page 4 of your new notes packet for Unit 3. Okay, so when we talk about sectionalism, this begins Unit 3 and it kind of starts where we left off. At Unit 2, we left off with new inventions that were made that made it easier to travel and ship goods and communicate across long distances. And in these ways, the nation was becoming more unified or together. But there were a lot of ways in which the nation was being pulled apart. Sectionalism happens when regions become more different from one another. The United States was becoming divided over regional differences in geography, economy, transportation, and cultures. So physical differences with the land in our country, economy of the way that the different areas of our country make money, transportation, there's different um like some parts of the country have more railroads than others, and some parts of the country have more rivers and lakes. So transportation is different, and then different types of people living in those regions. So we divide up into three main areas in the United States. Got the North and the South, and then there's the West. And the West is still kind of a little bit unsettled. We haven't divided it up into states yet. There are a couple exceptions there, like California, but it's just a different way of life out in the West than it is in the developed North, where there's a lot of cities, and in the South, where we have plantation farming. So, the first vocab word that's important to know is what a region is. A region is an area that shares things in common. And the second vocab word that we really need to know in this section is called sectionalism. And that is the differences between these regions in the United States. So when we look at sectionalism, the root word of that is section. And when we divide things into sections, we see some of the differences between them. Okay, so we're going to talk about these three sections: the North, the South, and the West. The North had many cities with harbors and ports for shipping. Waves of immigrants, mainly from Ireland, Germany, and Scandinavia, were coming to the country and settling in the northern cities and central plains. Cities grew in population. Many canals were built to link waterways, and the invention of the steam locomotive brought railroads to the North. The North had a mostly industrial economy with factories where immigrants worked. So in the North, we have factories, a lot of immigrant workers. Immigrant workers are paid. They came to America from a different country and they're living and working in the United States. We have a lot of railroads and canals. Those are those waterways. We have very large populated cities. Think like New York and Philadelphia and Chicago. Even Minneapolis and St. Paul are getting bigger at this time. And the country, or the region of the North, is also made up of free states. So we don't have slavery in the North. If you could label and color the North blue, that would be very helpful. We use the color blue because that leads us into the Civil War, and the North wore blue uniforms. So that's why we use blue as our color for the North. Our second region is the South. The South was based on agriculture, growing cash crops like cotton and tobacco on plantations. Cash crops are crops that are sold for money. So things that you can export and sell to other areas to make cash. These very large farms required many workers. The slave trade that brought slaves from Africa had been banned in 1807, but slaves were still bought and sold as laborers in the United States. Plantations were nearly self sufficient. That means they could take care of themselves. So very few cities were needed, and they had their own docks along the South's wide rivers to transport cash crops to sell in markets. So the South relied on slave labor. Okay, slaves do not get paid; they're not there on their own will. Okay, they work on these big plantations to harvest cash crops. Some of those cash crops are like cotton and tobacco. And because these plantations really could run themselves, they had a little bit of kind of that food and maybe some animals, so that they had um, fulfilled the needs of the people who lived on the plantation. They didn't really rely on big cities or factories for anything. We're going to color the South pink. We're using pink instead of red because it's easier to see through too sometimes. But yeah. The last region that we divide our country into right now is the West. The West was expanding quickly due to manifest destiny. The trails west brought pioneers, miners, missionaries, traders, and settlers further past the Mississippi River. People went west for many reasons, but the U.S. saw the West as a wealth of natural resources: farmland, forests, trapping, and mineral wealth. The Indian Removal Act allowed the government to forcibly move American Indian tribes west of the Mississippi River. So the West has a lot of our Native American people. It has pioneers and people who are moving west to start a new life. There's a lot of minerals and other natural resources in the West, one of which we talked about is gold, right? Let's color the West orange. So that West area is a lot more unsettled. Okay, changing a lot right now. Okay, this concludes your notes on sectionalism, notes 1. Have a good day.